On tonight's episode, Fred Zinkie of Yahoo Sports joins us for a comprehensive discussion on trading strategy, how to trade, when to trade, fairness of trades, and of course, how risk fits into the equation. Plus, we will have our waiver wire picks, pitcher preview, and an extended mailbag. Beat the Shift is next. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always, Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. I actually went into the city, into my office for the first time in 16 and a half months. Incredible day here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I've been doing that in the medical field for the past year or so. I missed like 3 months because of COVID, but otherwise, everything's going smoothly. Still doing the proper precautions because we don't want to have any sort of new outbreak or more of an outbreak than what's going on, because unlike football, baseball doesn't give that stiff of penalties when it comes to, testing positive for COVID.
Yeah. You never know what. Yeah, you never know what's going to go on in the world in the winter. Hey, listen, flu season is there, and there's always risk that COVID will increase in the winter, and I surely hope it doesn't. I surely hope we don't go backwards, but I'll take what I can, and great to be back in the office. Well, we've got a great episode today. I want to bring on the show from Yahoo Sports, Fred Zinkie. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, our pleasure. And we brought you on to talk about trading in our strategy section today, all about trading. Fred does quite a bit of trading in his expert leagues, and I'm sure home leagues as well. He's pretty good at it, so pick the right guy to talk about it. And just to throw out very, very generally to you to start, what is your general trading philosophy?
I say my general trading philosophy in the first half of the season is to try to acquire what I perceive to be an uptick in value, even if that uptick's very minor, but an uptick in value. And then my trading philosophy in the second half of the season is to attack categories that I think are necessary for me to move up in the standings. So I kind of have two different philosophies at two different points in the season.
My gosh, that was exactly the same answer I was about to give, by the way. Exactly.
Yeah,
I
think I think that's really the best way to go about it. And some people, when you talk about, I want to get value, some people will say, well, that means you have to rip the other person off in a deal, but it doesn't, because the great thing about fantasy baseball is that we don't all agree on how valuable the players are. And that's why we see different waiver wire bids every week in fab leagues, and that's why we see people drafting different teams out of different spots throughout March. So it's actually not that hard to find trades that both people are quite satisfied with, because we all value players differently, and our values of each player go up and down throughout the season.
Right. And the only thing I'll add to that is that it's a little bit harder these days to trade in terms of overall value, because, as projections come more commonplace, I think that people's perceptions of players are getting a little bit closer to another. I know for me, I'm doing the ATC projections. A lot of people have my book, so it's hard. And and also when you're coming right out of a draft, you buy a player for $10 because you think he's a $10 player, and somebody else buys a player for $10 because he thinks it's a $10 player, and not that they're a $6 player. So it's a little bit hard right after a draft to trade, because you're higher on somebody. That's why you bought him. So it's not exactly. But as you go on a month or two in the season, then things get a little bit more spread apart as the season has unfolded.
Yeah, I will make some April trades. You're right that it's different depending on whether it was a draft or an auction. If it's a draft, I will come out of that draft and look at the draft picks and think, I might think man, I was picking third, but if I was picking 13th, I would have been all over the values that this person here got in rounds, right? In rounds, on the round 3-4 turn. So right. I might make a play for one of those guys because they might like one of my early picks. I picked third, so I got a stud. I got someone who everybody loves. Well, maybe, I picked 13. They got my number 6 guy, and I got kind of everybody's number 3 guy. maybe this person will give me their first rounder and someone else I like they took in the middle rounds for my guy took third overall. There's always ways there because, like, let's be honest, if we just drafted at different spots, we'd have different rosters. And then with an auction or a salary cap draft, like you said, like you'll grab the guy who you think is worth 10, and I'll grab the guy who I think is worth 10, but it's not quite that cut and dry where sometimes certain players will go at certain points in the auction and I'll think, oh, I can't believe they got, I can't believe they just got Tyler O'Neill for $3. Like I would have paid 7 for him, but my outfield's full, or I would have paid 7 for him, but I just don't have it anymore. So I'll bookmark on my sheet, some of the deals that I thought were the best. And if someone else got 2 or 3 of the deals that I thought were the best, then I might go to them afterwards and say, I really like the deals you got on a couple guys. Like, did you like the prices I paid for a couple guys? Maybe there's a way we can do a 2-for-1 or something like that. So you're right. April trading is a little trickier in that regard, but there are still ways to get a deal done. Although some people just won't deal in April. There are people who just want to draft their team and sit on it till May, and I get that. It's their team; they can do what they want with it.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys actually. I don't like doing these early trades because a lot of these early trades, the rest of the league looks at it. They're like, wait a second, this isn't fair, and you get so many vetoes very early on in the season because everyone has such different values for different players. You think you're getting a great deal, someone else is getting a great deal, and everyone else in the league thinks that one team is fleecing the other one. So it's so hard to do it later. And you know what? When it comes down to trading, my personal opinion is we only go to trade for a need. I really don't try to stockpile anything when it comes to trades early in the season. I really look for if I have a glaring need, if a player goes down real early, that's something I'll go after. But otherwise, I tend to rely more on my drafting skills and try to, enhance my team with trades occasionally, but not that often.
Yeah. The other thing I'll also add is that in the middle of the year, you might come up with a roster surplus on your team, and so if you have 3 shortstops on your bench, all who you probably should not be dropping, that's another area where, all right, I've got an extra shortstop, maybe I'm a little bit thin pitching, and you can swap like for like value and just get rid of the roster surplus. Question to you though, Fred, is how do you know when you should look for a trade versus just playing the waiver wire? I mean, certainly if, let's say, big guy Tyler Glass now gets hurt, I mean, sure, I'd love to have another pitcher, but it's going to cost me if I trade for him. Should I just go to the waiver wire? Or how do you know when to say, well, in order to fill the need, I need to do it the trade route? Of course, waiver wire, you don't have to give up any assets other than your fab capital.
Yeah, no, well, and sometimes the two things complement each other where, like you said, you may have an injury and you may think, I think I'm going to go to the waiver wire. And then you look at the waiver wire and you're like, I think I'm going to go to the trades. I've looked at the waiver wire and I have now changed my mind. I am not impressed with what's available. I go to the trade markets in a different way sometimes. Just as I'm following baseball and fantasy baseball, sometimes ideas pop into my head and I see maybe like an angle on something. So, a really obvious one would be like Luis Castillo struggled mightily for the first couple months of the season. And there were numerous buy low opportunities out there. If I was a guy who believed in Luis Castillo, which I didn't trade for him in any leagues, but that's an obvious one that pops in my head. I could be following Luis Castillo. I could hear him discussed on some podcasts, and I could be like, wow, the market is really down on this guy. I don't think I'm quite as down on him as the market is. You know what? I think I'll approach the Luis Castillo owner in a couple of my leagues and just see how down they are. Like, I'll throw them out something that's a buy low, but reasonable buy low, and just see what they say. Or again, I have Castillo and NL tout, and I didn't sell low on him, but there might have been a point where I'm just like, you know what, I'm done with this guy. I'm going to find a 50 cents on the dollar deal and I'm out. So a lot of my trade negotiations, sometimes they're spurred by, like you said, like I had an injury to a closer or something like that, or I'm lagging behind in home runs and I need to find a home run hitter. But they're often more individual player based where I'll see a player out there and I'm just like, okay, I think I've become higher on this person. Maybe I'm doing research, writing an article, and I'm like, okay, this guy, I like what I see here. I think I'm higher than the market on this guy. I'm going to go and put a fair offer in on him, or I'm lower than this guy. I'm going to try to get him off my team, before other people maybe feel the same way about him I do. So sometimes mine are individual player based, at least in the first half of the season. Now they're more category based, where I'm looking for certain types of players.
Ruven?
Yeah, I totally agree. In the very beginning, you should be looking for certain players that, you know what, that's the player that I want. Every week we scour the waiver wire and we're saying, okay, we can get this category on the waiver wire, we can get this category on the waiver, and there's a certain trend on the waiver wire what you can get. Like, people usually go after saves on the waiver wire or stolen bases, that type of thing. But it's very hard to find power on the waiver wire. It's very hard to find those big, high strikeout pictures on the waiver wire unless you're going to go for the trade. And those are the guys you have to target. And sometimes you need to package a couple of guys together to get that one big name.
Yeah, I tend to go for on the waiver wire. You can find the 250, 25 homer guys. Depending upon the depth of your league. You can find 450 ERA, 135 WHIP, 9K per nine. You can find that in streaming. I would not trade for somebody like that because those are not unique profiles. Or even if, sure, you can't find a 30 homer guy in the waiver wire, but you can find a 25 homer guy. Certainly not worth giving up an asset to gain 5 more homers. It's the uniqueness. To me, it's the uniqueness of the player profile. You're not going to make up somebody who steals 30 stolen bases. You're not going to make up closers that are really good. You're not going to make up 2020 players. Uniqueness of profile is very important, and that's what I look for trading. If I either need someone or if I think that somebody is undervalued with unique profile, that's when I'd want to trade. So the question to you, Fred, is how do you identify what to trade for to help your roster, and how do you identify what you can trade with from your roster to get it?
Right. So during the value phase, I like what to trade for is just players who I feel I feel are maybe undervalued by the market right now. During the stand, like now that we're into the second half, during that like standings phase, it's a little more, I think maybe it's a little more clear cut where, I'm looking at the standings. I'm not looking at the categories that I'm bad in. I think that's always misleading advice. Like when people say like, well, find your weakest categories and address those weaknesses. Well, that's like okay in April, but by now, like you might be hopeless in some of those categories. You might be second last, staring way up at third last. So I'm looking for the tightly bunched categories and the ones where I can make a move in those. And I also one thing that you have to look at this point in the year is, so you want to move up in certain categories. Well, like your roster's probably changed throughout the season so far. So is your current roster already poised to move up in that category, or is it still the same old, same old? So for example, maybe you're in a tightly bunched home run race. So you think, oh, I got to go and get a home run hitter. Well, maybe you've already added some home run hitters off waivers the last like 3 weeks. They just haven't totally taken effect yet. So it's not just looking at the categories, but it's also looking at the categories and what you honestly think the potential is for your roster. I have a league where I'm tightly bunched in steals, but I have Modesty on my IR. Well, normally I would want to go out and make a trade for a base stealer, but I don't because I'm going to roll the dice on Modesty coming back. I think that's a fair gamble to take to try to win that league, or at least to push ahead in the steals category. So you got to kind of compare your roster with the categories at this point.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And actually, I was going to make the same exact point that it's not what you're bad in, it's what the tightly bunched. The word for that is it's categories with a high gradient. And it's when it's tightly bunched, and it's not just where you can gain, but it also could be where you can lose. If you have 75 homers and the next couple are in your category of 70, 74, 73, 72, 71, you could stand to lose 4 points really easily. So I would trade for homers there so that you don't lose any points. And of course, conversely, the other way around, if you got 71 homers and the next couple ahead of you are 72, 73, 74, well, that's a fantastic place to trade with. It's the high gradient, not the what do I need.
There's actually one other aspect that you're not thinking about. Let's say you're in third place. You look at the teams ahead of you. Where are they in the categories that you're behind them in? How close are you? Because if you can catch up in that one category, it's a 2-point swing either way. You can knock them down one and you go up one. So you have to look those categories also.
Yeah. how do you engage teams for trades? Do you either reach out individually with people and give them initial offers? Do you do you lowball offers initially because you can always negotiate, or do you give people something really close to the final offer? Do you do like a trade block thing where you just shout out to the league, guys, I'm trading this guy, or guys, I need a shortstop, and get offers? How do you engage the team that you do?
Yeah, I try to never do the trade block thing. I find I've never had any great experiences with